Thank you so much, Mark. It's really my pleasure to be here and sort of have this discussion with everyone at a time that seems so pivotal for everybody to kind of be having this discussion. So my presentation today is on 59 minutes to peace of mind, and my goal of this presentation is to really make it applicable to agencies, to individuals, to families, to couples, to whoever needs to hear it at any moment in time, and for you to come away from this with some real tools and skills that you can apply in your daily life. So we're going to kind of go through an overview of what we're going to cover today. And one of the first things that we're going to cover is, what is peace of mind? What does that mean? For a lot of us, it's kind of a colloquialism. It's something that people throw around as a term, or a definition of something that we don't ever really define or nail down for ourselves. And through that, we're going to go through, how do we find it? How do we identify it? What does it look like? How do we integrate it into our daily life? How do we know we have peace of mind in our daily life? And also, what I think is also really important for people to go through is, how do we find solace and cope when times are imperfect and times are trying and it's harder for us to find peace? How do we find it then? It's really easy to find peace when everything is good and everything is going well and we have space and time to do so. It's a lot harder for people to find it and achieve it when times are complicated. And the next thing we'll go over too is some complexities and rewards in living a peaceful life and working towards achieving a peaceful life. And also, what does it mean for us to choose and find our own happiness? Happiness, a lot of us tend to think, is an emotion or a feeling, but for what we know in a greater way of living, it's an actual active choice of lifestyle, to live your life in a happy way. And then I'm going to talk about some tools that we can use to increase our transparency and our connection to others, and how we can take kind of what we've learned here today and use that in our agencies and our relationships and our families, and also so how we know best to reach out to someone that we might care about, that we find might be struggling with peace of mind or peace or coping, whether it's right now or 5 years from now. My goal is to be able to sort of pay it forward of all the people who've taught me along the way and things that I've learned, and be able to pass it on to other people, and that they find some sort of tools and skills, and to be able to get through times that are trying and times that are rewarding. So we're going to start out, as we kind of go through this, doing just like a quick general poll of some general questions, just to kind of help you sort of pique your interest of what we're thinking about and what we're looking at, and you'll see it kind of pop up on your screen, and we'll give you, a couple seconds to kind of respond, and then it kind of gives us a way to kind of gauge as what we're going to look at going forward, and how that kind of fuels our knowledge and what we already think we assume that we know. And so we can push it further and kind of question what peace of mind really is and how we can work to achieve it. So we'll give you a couple seconds to go ahead and vote on the first poll. Okay, so do you have a good grasp on how to define peace of mind? 78% of us say yes, 22% said no, which is actually pretty common. We're going to go into kind of defining it right now. So what is peace of mind? So you'll see the picture here. This is actually my children. And for me, peace of mind, if I had to think about an image for me that describes peace of mind, that's really it for me. But what we know about looking at peace of mind is that it's our own working definition, because what I define as peace of mind is completely different from what my best friend may find as peace of mind, from what my colleagues may find peace of mind, to what my clients find peace of mind. So it's a fluid and working definition that is individually defined. But what we can all agree on is, when we really look at peace of mind as a phrase, it is essentially based on feeling safe, feeling protected, and feeling prepared. So when you look at those as contributing factors to establishing peace of mind, it's important to really think about that, because a feeling of safety is, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a very basic primal need, is our need to feel safe. So when we think about what's going on in the world, what's going on in our life, if someone is not able to feel safe, whether that's in their body, in their home, in their relationship, in their workplace, in their life, it is almost impossible for them to achieve some sort of peace of mind. So when we're looking at when people are struggling with achieving peace of mind, we need to look at like how safe does this person feel? What is threatening their safety? Do they feel protected? Do they feel prepared in their life? And we also have to understand that safety is based on an individual perception. So trauma, much like safety, is based on perception. So what we see as making us feel more safe is fluid from person to person. Knowing that my children are healthy and happy and enjoying their life makes me feel very safe in my life. What that is for other people is totally different, and that's okay. But it's important for us to, when we're looking at achieving peace of mind, really look at what makes us feel safe. Are finances important? Is housing important? Is our relationship important? Is extended family important? Is our faith system important? Is our, self-actualization in our world important? Is advocacy important? What is it in our life that makes us feel safe, that makes us feel belonging and protected and prepared? We also need to understand it as an identified feeling as opposed to an absence of feeling. So, a lot of times people will define peace of mind as, well, but I'm not stressed. Well, that's an absence of feeling. What you want to look at is, but how do you really feel? How do you feel when you have peace of mind? Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel safe? Do you feel happy? Do you feel like you can breathe differently? So it's not just an absence of feeling. We want to really look at what you're feeling when that happens. If people say, I have the greatest peace of mind when I'm at my mother's house, what is the emotions that you feel when you're there? Because those emotions are what contributes to that feeling of safety. If it's belonging, if it's, people say, well, it's when I'm not alone. Okay, so then it's belonging. We don't always want to identify our peace of mind as something being absent and a negative connotation in our life. We want to really reward the things that are present in our life, like, because that allows us to build from those pillars to put more of those things that are present in our life. We also have to understand that a peace of mind is an integration of thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and behaviors. So it doesn't just come from, well, I feel happy today. Okay, what thought informed you to feel happy? Right? Our feelings don't come from nowhere. They come from a thought, they come from a belief. Well, I belong in this school. My friends are here. They're happy to see me. So therefore I feel happiness. So we have to start looking at the connectivity of how we live our life, the choices we make, the people we surround ourselves with, the thoughts that we allow to take up space in our mind, and the behaviors that we execute with them. All of those things are important. So if I know having a warm cup of coffee in the morning makes me feel happy and that I get peace of mind and solace, I actually have to get up, put the water in the coffee pot, make my coffee, get creamer, make that space, have my favorite cup. There are things that go into making that feeling real. So we have to look at the integration of how we apply things in our life to make them feel real and powerful. So we're going to move on to our next poll. And I'll give you a couple seconds to respond. Okay. So, like 50% of people said it's a state of mind, which is true. That's usually where it begins. All of the above is also correct, because part of it is about not only what we think and what we believe and how we feel, but what we do with it. That's where it starts to have action and power in our life. We can have peace of mind within our thoughts and feelings, but how we achieve it and manifest it into our life is also important. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So, how do we find peace in our daily life? So, like I said before, coffee is important in my daily life. It makes me feel very peaceful and grounded and connected to all things big and small. So, when we find peace in our daily life, a lot of the time when we think about, okay, well, I want to have peace of mind, I want to be peaceful, I want to be well rounded, I want to be grounded, we think like, okay, so I have to meditate and be silent and be Zen, when really it's you have to think small. If it's Listen, I really just need a cup of coffee in the morning. If that gets me through the next 5 minutes, think big, think small, and then think big. So, what do I need right now in this moment? And then, what are my journeys for the rest of my life? Is it important that I feel happy throughout my day? Is it important that I have a job that I love? Is it important that I have a relationship that's rewarding? Is it important that I have children, don't have children, travel? Those are bigger items that make us feel peace and happiness in our daily life. But I want people to feel more in control of every single day when we get up, we can make choices about how we feel peace. If it's that moment of getting that first cup of coffee and sitting on the lanai and just having a minute of silence or returning an email or looking at an old pictures of our friends or reading a magazine or reading the paper, if that's what gets you grounded in peace as you get up in the morning, you can do that throughout your day. Even if it's as small as I need to go outside for a walk for 5 minutes. That's just going to bring me some peace and kind of reset my body, reset my limbic system, and be ready to engage. So build your toolbox. Really look at what do we need to find peace in our daily life. So if you take an inventory of your day, where do I feel the happiest? Where do I feel the most at peace? What's happening when that's happening? Am I at home? Am I at work? Am I with other people? Am I with family? And if I am, what family and what are we doing? Does cooking for people make me happy? So build the things in your toolbox. Really start to identify those those issues that make you feel happiness every single day, and then set goals about them. If it's like, I really enjoy cooking for people, it may be like, what, once a week or once every month, I'm gonna, bring food to my grandmother, or I'm gonna bring, you know, muffins to service one day, or whatever it is. It can be as big or as small as you need it to be. That's the most important thing about finding peace. It doesn't have to be this overarching existential crisis that we need to come to and evolve into a higher being of Zen. It can be every single day. Like having my favorite creamer brings me peace. Having my favorite coffee cup brings me happiness. Identify connections of our feelings and our needs we long to have fulfilled. So if it's that cup of coffee, or if it's talking to an old friend on the phone that you really miss, the need that you're having feel is that loneliness and missing them. It's not really about the phone call, it's about fulfilling the feeling of missing them, and resolving it, and having our need met of feeling connected to someone we love and care about, and feeling that connection and feeling important in their life and knowing that they're important in our life. And that's, I get it, really difficult to do right now. And there are lots of barriers that have shifted the way we connect to each other. But the human connection can supersede all of those things. Whether it's just a phone call to be like, hey, you know what? You were on my mind today, and I want you to know that I love you and I miss you. And I'm just thinking of you. And that may mean nothing to you today, but it meant something to me. And if that's what brings you happiness and resolves that feeling of like, I'm really thinking about this person and I'm starting to feel resentment and uncomfortable because I haven't talked to them in a while, and that makes me a bad person. So then I don't talk to them and they're not talking to me. Just reach out beyond that and be like, you know what? I really need to reach out to this person today. Even if it's just like, hey, I'm thinking of you. I love you. I hope you have a great, Thursday. It doesn't have to be a huge overarching philosophy. It can be something that you're doing every single day to bring more happiness and peace into your day, into your hour, into your moment. Surround yourself with support and options. So we thrive in our environment. I'm a social worker. We believe that human behavior is influenced by our social environment. So what we have around us and our support systems around us, our pillars that hold up our house, are important. So whether that's our friends, our family, our workspace, what we, allow ourselves to be exposed to, what we allow to take time or space up in our life, really start looking and having an inventory and a negotiation of that. I say to people all the time, pay attention to what you allow to take up space, not only in your life, but in your mind and in your attention span. So if driving to work is super, super, stressful, and it causes you anxiety, and, it's kind of you get in your own head and you're thinking about all these feelings, like listen to something that brings you joy, whether it's a podcast, whether it's your favorite music, whether it's, videos of your children, whatever it is that you're listening to that brings you that peace. You have to integrate it into our daily life. It's not something that you're like, okay, well, when I'm, 65 and relaxed and I have time, then I'll get happy. We don't want to survive our life. We want to engage in it, and we want to live it, and we want to thrive within it. So surround yourself with support and options. And why I say options is because some days Some of those options are more than others, and some days those options are easier than others. When it's really, really busy, it's hard to connect with people. It's hard to do all the fun things that we should be doing for ourselves every day. There are days you can't go for a walk, but you know what? There may be days that you can just stand up in your office and stretch, run some water over your hands, kind of get cool, have a nice cool glass of ice water. If that's as much as you can do for yourself that day, that's okay. It's still a win. Peace and happiness is not about, and feeling safe is not about an all or nothing. It's a spectrum of where we find ourselves being able to achieve our goals on any given day. So, with those support and options, you also want to think about what's my emergency plan? And when I talk about an emergency plan, it's like, surely there are days that are better than others. And surely there are times that there are emergencies. And there are times that we are not doing well and we are not at peace and we are not happy. So, what is our emergency plan? What do we need? What is our lifeline to feel safe on those days? And sometimes it can just be a text to your best friend. Sometimes it's listening to your favorite song. Sometimes it can be deep breathing. For some people, it can be, I need a minute to just silently talk to myself out of this. And it's okay. We all go through trials and tribulations and days that are not okay. But it's also important to look at it. It's one moment in time. It's one moment, it's one day, it's one event. It doesn't define your whole life. Tomorrow's another day. And it's important for people to know, like, what is my emergency plan? What really makes me feel at peace? Excuse me. If for you, your emergency plan is like, listen, I know that when I'm super duper stressed and I feel like I don't have a moment to myself, what is it that makes me feel more grounded? What is it that makes me feel more connected? And sometimes that's just like having 5 minutes when you're home to change, to kind of get organized, to wash your face and just sit down. If that's what it is, if it's when you pull in your driveway, it's having 5 minutes in your car before you enter your home, then that's okay. But you want to know what these emergency tools are that you can put into place when you're struggling. And you also want to think about emergency people you bring into your life when you're struggling. I have a very, select group of people who I know if it was the middle of the night, the middle of the day, big or small, if I call and I said, I need you, they will drop everything and come to me. Now, there are people who don't have that support system. So they need to look at, are there other things? Do I have a faith system? Do I have colleagues that I could reach out to that I feel safe with, that I'm not going to feel judged? We also need to reflect, reframe, and rationalize, and then reflect again on what we're looking at. So, all of us, we have these days that are just, you wish you just went back to bed. That you want to start the day all over. You spill your coffee, your kid forgets their lunch, you are stuck in traffic, you get pulled over, you have a, flat tire, and you're just like, okay, we need to restart. And in the midst of all that chaos and stress and discomfort and feeling not safe and feeling threatened at times and feeling, intimidated and overwhelmed, the reality is it's but one day in your life. And each one of those things are but one moment in your life. And the moment that you get through them, you're beyond it. It doesn't have to hold you hostage in that exact moment in time. You can move past it, and tomorrow is another day. And you have to reframe and rationalize, like, this day will pass. Time will pass. It will be this afternoon, will be 2 o'clock at some point, and will be 7 o'clock at some point tonight. Time will move on, and I will move through this. How I do it and what I do afterwards to care for myself is up to me. And part of that is being able to look at what we can control and what we can't control, and being able to come to a place where we can reflect on that, accept it, and rationalize and reframe what we need in our life to feel peace. So before we move on, we're going to bring up our next poll. I'll give you a couple seconds. Okay, pretty fair. So about half of us feel like we do, and the other half kind of feel like sometimes, which is pretty normal. A lot of us feel like, well, I have peace in my life, but not all the time, and not all the times I want to. And then there are some of us that say, no, I don't. I really don't. And this isn't to shame or blame or look at people who don't and say like you need to do better. It's about we all need to do better all the time. We're all trying to do more for ourselves and be more happier and more peaceful in our daily lives and in our daily moments. So it's totally okay to feel like we don't have peace at all in our lives. This is just sort of geared towards like what can we do in any given moment to take care of ourselves. So how do we find peace during a time of crisis, which I feel is definitely fitting given our timing in the world today. Um, so identify what is yours to own and what is not. And that's a really good way to reframe things where we feel like we have some control over things that seem out of control. So identify what I can control and what I cannot. If my tire blows out, I don't have control over whether there's nails on the road or not. I don't have control over whether my tire hits one or not. What I do control is, can I keep myself safe? Can I ask for help? And can I make arrangements and ask for forgiveness if I need to change my schedule? Those are things that are in my control. A lot of the time what we think is ours is because we're trying to evade, judgment or shame or blame of not being perfect and not being what we think other people expect us to be. When really, if someone calls you and is like, listen, I'm really sorry, I can't make this meeting. My tire's blown out and I'm on the side of 75. Very few people would be like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. You should be here anyway. People don't feel that way, but we hold ourselves to this standard of things that we expect to own and be ours that are just not able to be ours. It's just not realistic. We often expect of ourselves way more than what other people are willing to do. So it's hard to really find that empathy for ourselves and that kindness for ourselves during crisis. Identify what can be changed, impacted, or negotiated and what cannot. I tell clients all the time about like 95% of things in life can be negotiated. It may not be a perfect negotiation, but usually things can be negotiated. If you miss a meeting or you're late for something, you're not the only one on the planet that's ever done that. It's something that we can have a solution to. It may not be the perfect solution that we wanted, but there is a solution. It doesn't mean you're stuck, and it doesn't mean you have to be unhappy or that you're in crisis. There's a way to move through something or move around. Identify immediate triggers and relief solutions. So if you know that public speaking causes you to go into a crisis, then we have to find relief solutions. You need to take care of yourself. If you know that flying causes you an immediate trigger or stress, then you need to take care of yourself and find ways to do that. If you think about, I know that when I listen to the news, it really aggravates me and I get really worried and I start, to really go down this rabbit hole of concern and angst. It's like, okay, well, how can I take care of myself throughout that? There are things on the news that I cannot control, most of it. So where do I sit with that? What can I control? I can control what I can consume. I control what I pay attention to, and I control for how long. And I also control what I do with it afterwards. Do I have to stew on it? Do I have to identify with it? Do I have to really take it all in? Or can I buffer it with some other things? And can I be kind to myself in how I process that information? So stay present and stay grounded. Again, this is difficult at times like these because there's so much going around. And like when I say to kids when they're in crisis, it's like someone tipped the snow globe upside down and all the snow is flying around. And so all of a sudden you don't know what's up, what's down, what's present, what's not present, what's concrete, what's attached, and what's not. And that's kind of what crisis feels like. It feels like everything we thought was settled is all up in the air and nobody knows anything. And there's no answers and there's no predictability. And that makes people feel unsafe. So that's usually when our happiness and peace quotient goes way down, when we feel unsafe. So we have to stay present and stay grounded. I always say to kids, like, what is happening for you right in this moment? What's something you can see? What's something you can taste? What's something you can feel? What's something you can touch? What's something you can smell? Stay present. You're here right now in this moment. What can we choose to do right now? Okay, well, you can choose to take a deep breath. We can choose to talk through it. We can choose to take a nap. You can choose to take a shower. You can choose to take a walk. You can have to stay present and stay grounded within our realm of control. And in that brings us peace because it allows us to feel safe in our own surroundings. Also, it's important to compartmentalize needs. A lot of the time, you'll see this with rapid thinking when there's a crisis. People will say, I didn't get on this plane. Oh my goodness, I'm never going to get to my cousin's wedding. She's never going to speak to me again. Okay, so one is immediate, short term, long term, right? So is she never going to speak to you again? We're not even there yet. The immediate crisis is, how do you get on this plane? Is that even doable? If it's not, it's negotiable. Can you get on tomorrow? Can you get on later? Can you go to a different airline? So part of it is compartmentalizing what is an all in or all out, and what is a deal breaker. And most things aren't. We just need to compartmentalize them during a crisis to think like, what is your immediate need at this moment in time? What do we do after that? And then what do we do after that? It's about building a strategy. A lot of people, the reason that we fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is because we feel stuck, we feel threatened, we feel defensive, and we feel like there's no solution, there's no way out. There's no hand that's pulling us forward to say, like, here's a path through. So a lot of the time when we feel that way, we got to think for ourselves, okay, what is happening for me right now? My tire is flat. Okay, I'm pulled over on the side of the road. Okay, I'm safe in my car. Can I safely get out? Can I call for help? Okay, so that's an immediate and short-term response. Long-term is like, okay, I'm going to need to, can I change my tire here? Can I call someone who can? Do I have to have it towed? Those are long-term things. But if we take them in steps and stairs and compartmentalize them, it's a lot easier for someone to proceed towards peace. Reframe time as seasons of our life. A lot of the time when people talk about being in crisis, they're like, my whole life has been a crisis. Okay, for some people that is true. But for most of us, the time frame around crisis or loss or sadness or feeling of lack of peace is also around a time or a season in our life, and it passes. There's transitions. Even if it feels like it goes on forever, it's not as bad as it was the first day that it happened. So even in that, there's a transition. Even when people are healing, and when I worked in a hospital, and people would be like, "Oh my goodness, this is horrible. I'm in so much pain," but it's not as bad as the first day I came out of surgery. Then you're reframing it. Then you're getting better. You're in the process of healing. You feel safer today than the day you came out. So part of it is that is reframing our peace as a process and as a journey, and us moving through and beyond crisis. Um, and it's important to do that because it makes people feel like they have hope and they have a solution and they have a path forward. And that allows us to feel safe and secure and protected. And those things are huge negotiations when it comes to finding peace of mind. So we'll have another poll before we move on, and I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer. Yeah, it's that's pretty pivotal. Most of us have a really hard time with this. Our mind is moving and our emotions move, miles in front of where our body can comprehend. Um, and you're right. Sometimes we do better than others. Depends on the stressor for certain people. But it's important to look at like, okay, when stressful things happen, how do I cope? And is that coping method healthy? Is it working for me, or does it actually make me more stressed out? Does it create a whole other crisis for me? And what can I do to negotiate that? What are other things and stress and things I can put in place that help me move past that? And we'll talk about that too. So complexities and rewards. So part of the hard part of moving through a peace of mind is, yes, there are really concrete things that you can do in your life to apply that give you peace of mind. Are those things easy? Not always. And are other people always going to understand or appreciate them? Not always. And that's kind of the hard part of this dynamic, is that choosing happiness and choosing to find peace of mind in a way in your life where you feel safe and controlled and protected is not always the same experience for other people, and what their expectations are of you and what they think it should look like. But this is really an individual thing that you need to identify, is what makes you happy and what do you need in your life. So one of the things that we always talk about with complexities is boundaries. Now, if you ask people what a boundary is, you'll probably get 67 different definitions of what a boundary is. So even when I talk about working with kids a lot, when I work with kids, I always say, like, think about a boundary like a fence around your house, right? It separates your yard from somebody else's. It keeps your trash in your yard and their trash in their yard. It's how we know where we begin and end. And that's true in relationships and physical boundaries and emotional boundaries and work boundaries. It's like, how do we know when we're done? How do we know what's ours to own and what's somebody else's? So sometimes choosing to live a life where you have a quality peace of mind means setting boundaries. And that's really uncomfortable, to be honest, for most people, because sometimes we don't really know what they look like. We don't really know when we get there, and we don't really know how it's going to be received or what other people think about them. And we go through this whole process of challenging ourselves. And a lot of the time we have to look at, like, what do I value? What do I need? And how does this make me feel? So if I'm, working 18 hours a day, I'm sure other people would really enjoy that. But how is that making me feel? Is that working for me? Is it working for my happiness? Does it make me a better person? Does it make me a better therapist? Does it make me a better mother? So setting boundaries around things are not punishments or denials of limits. It's just sometimes being able to encapsulate and set boundaries around what's ours to manage and what's not. Limiting complex relationships, and that's really hard for people. We live complex lives. We have complex people in our lives, and sometimes we need to limit exposure to some of that. If you know that there's someone that's very triggering to you, or that you feel is aggressive or assertive in a way that you just kind of offends your sense of peace, and it doesn't mean that they're bad people. There are just people that happens to. Then it's okay to limit contact. It's okay to negotiate a relationship. And sometimes the most complex of relationships. When I work with children, I'll say to them, sometimes you're going to have the dad who's the National Lampoon's dad, who's going to cut the turkey and put the Christmas lights up and do all the right things and be in all the right places and be at every game. And sometimes you're going to have the dad that you can only, maybe send a card to once a year on Father's Day, or you meet in Starbucks for a coffee. And that doesn't mean that any of those are right or wrong. It means that you have to understand the spectrum of a complex relationship and be able to navigate it. And those navigations affect our sense of peace of mind. They affect how we relate to the world. We're affected by other people. We don't like to admit that, but it's true. How other people's attitudes, their energies, how they approach us, how they phrase things to us, their outlook on life does affect us. So sometimes we have to limit that, especially when there is a complex relationship. We also want to be conscious of our conscious choices. How do I live my life? What do I do to be happy? And some of the rewards that go with this are achieving the authenticity of self, feeling like, yes, I know what I want. I know what I need. I know I can make choices for myself, and I don't need to feel guilty or shame or blame or judgment about any of those things. It also gives us a freedom to feel emotion, where it's okay for us to say, like, you know what, I'm really overwhelmed. I apologize. I'm really late. I blew my tire on the way into work. And being able to put a name to that and really speak that language of emotion is really freeing, because a lot of the time we like to think we move through our life without having emotion, or we expect each other to not feel emotion or name it. And it doesn't mean you have to fall to pieces, as you're walking into work, but if you do, that's okay. But it's also okay to be like, oh my goodness, my morning was kind of a mess. It's okay to just talk about how we're feeling about things. It means that you're connected to how you feel, how you think, and what your behavior is, and what's happening in your life. It also allows us to be less reactive and more deliberate in our action. So if I had a horrible morning where I spilt coffee all over myself and I'm late, it's okay for me to come in and be like, you know what? I had a really messy morning. I need to go, like, grab a cup of coffee and, like, get a minute to get myself together. That's a deliberate action. I'm not asking for anyone to excuse the fact that I was late or what happened or whatever. It is a fact. I'm stating my emotion, I'm stating my reaction, and I'm asking for a way to take care of myself. And it's okay to do that. Let me also say that as you start doing this, it's going to feel really uncomfortable, and you may get some really bizarre feedback from people around you if they're not used to you asking for what you want and what you need emotionally. Like, sometimes if you say to people, like, I just need 5 minutes, I'm going to go have a coffee and I need to just have some quiet. People will be like, oh, okay. Are you all right? Yeah, I'm actually going to be fine. And you'll see, like, there's an uncomfortability that goes with that. And that's usually an indication that people are uncomfortable with talking about peace of mind and happiness and their emotions. Um, in my field, we talk about them all the time, so it's not as rare. But it's important to start looking at more deliberate action for what brings you peace. So we're going to have another poll before we move forward. I agree. Most people are not comfortable discussing issues related to coping and stress. For the most part, most people don't really have the language around it either, of how to talk about it or what to say or what it means. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So choosing and finding happiness. Be honest about your happiness inventory, what you need to be happy. Identify what brings balance to your life and relationships. Sometimes, I'm the worst for this, where I will say yes to everything because I like to help as much as I can. But then I got to look at, does that really make me happy? What parts of it make me happy? And does it make me happy only if I'm effective? And it's okay to accept and honor those limitations. It's okay to say, like, you know what, I really want to help you, but I can't do it today. Can you come back to me next week? If you really want to be involved, it's okay to set those limitations. And part of that is those boundaries that we talked about earlier. Also, surrounding yourself with other elements and people that bring you joy. It's important to look at your environment. So, are there other people around you that also choose happiness? Are there other people in your life that allow you to be honest and vulnerable and open about, all the ugly things we say to ourselves inside of our heads, and are able to really reframe that for you? Surround yourself with people who do that. Becoming more in touch with our body, our feelings, our thoughts, and our behaviors. And part of that, what I mean is when people say, like, I don't feel like I have peace of mind. Well, where do you feel it? Is it a feeling in your body? Is it a feeling in your mind? Is it, I feel my whole shoulders tense? Like, really take time to really look at our limbic system and how our body is reacting to that fight, flight, freeze. People will say to me all the time, when I'm really, really stressed, I feel like I'm going to be sick. And there's a reason for that. When we are in that response, cortisol and adrenaline and all these other things are dumping into our stomach that cause pretty severe nausea. So, I'll say to people, listen, if you need to walk, if you need to, have a glass of water as we're talking, and it will eventually decrease, but part of it is being that self-aware to say, like, I don't feel good, or I feel agitated, or I feel overwhelmed. It's important to really look at that and take that time to self-soothe. Now, whenever I say that and say, we need to take time to self-soothe, people think, like, oh, what does that mean? Like, I have to do yoga in my office? No. If that's what you choose to do and that's a possibility, I encourage it. But sometimes a way of self-soothing is like, you know what? I need to just take a minute, reread this email, really read what it said to me before I respond and be reactive. Take time to self soothe can be, I'm going to shut my door when I have lunch and have some quiet time to myself. It can be having a glass of water. It can be going for a walk. It can be whatever my body needs to respond to in order to restore itself to homeostasis. So, what we know is that once someone is activated and is through a crisis or feels reactive, it takes the body about 30 to 45 minutes to really come off of that and feel like they're back to a state of being where they can really re-engage. So take that time to self-soothe. And if you don't have that time, acknowledge that you don't have that time, but know that you're going to need to repair and do it later. And practice graciousness with yourself is so important. We are not perfect. We are an imperfect being most of the time, and that is totally okay. We are imperfect mothers. We are imperfect fathers. I say to clients all the time, like, I'm a children's therapist, and there's times that I am not the best mother that I want to be. And I make mistakes all the time. And that's okay. And I acknowledge it. And I apologize, and I own my own stuff, and I will grow, and I will learn, and I will attempt to do better. And that doesn't mean I'm any less of a person or any less human or any less of a good human being. So we have to practice graciousness with ourselves and with others, and try to find tolerance and appreciation in times it's really hard. And sometimes we want to look at, like, why is it hard for me right now? Is it because I have a different agenda than somebody else, or I'm more or less aware than someone else? And we have to really look at how we're practicing that and what that means to us. And I think there's another poll. That's probably pretty accurate. And the reason that people are not transparent about their level of stress is usually because they're fearful of judgment. They're fear for how other people are going to respond to our levels of stress. Some people too are overwhelmed with not knowing what to do with it, or we're fearful of asking for help, or we don't want to appear weak or disorganized or unhealthy or in need. And the truth is that we are all in need most of the time. I don't know anybody who doesn't need kindness or graciousness or can help or in any given moment of any day. So it's important to be aware of that. So increasing transparency and connection. So when we talk about, how are we coping? How do we help other people? How do we, facilitate this, not only just as people who are on this webinar, but in our life, in our jobs, in our faith systems, in our schools? How do we do that? And it starts with this open communication and a change of the dialogue. And, that's why I really love this picture. It's like finding a connection when the outside of us tells us we can't. And really realizing that all those things that tell us we can't are constructs. They're not really real. I often give the example, if you see somebody struggling, be like, hey, can I help you? It's okay to offer help. It's okay to have a dialogue where people are overwhelmed or need help or feel sad that day or are going through something, that it's okay to talk about. And even if it's ugly and messy and it's difficult, that it's okay. We all have ugly, messy, and difficult. And people who say that they don't are not being honest or are lacking awareness. We have to really unweave a basket of feelings too, because a lot of time people will be like, I don't know, I feel sad today. I feel agitated. Okay. By what? Really pull that apart. Is it that you're agitated? Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you disappointed? Are you frustrated? Are you lonely? Because all of those feelings are very, very different and they come from very different places. And if we're not really mapping it back to where that wound is, we're not really applying the right healing. So we want to really know it. And especially if you're a leader in the community or you're a leader in your household or you're a leader in your relationship, model the behavior. And I always give the example, like I have a small child and, um, she's having a rough day and having difficulty managing emotion. I will say to her, like, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? What do you need from me? Are you grumpy? Are you sad? Are you tired? Do you need a cheese stick? Because part of it is me modeling the behavior for her, that it's okay to talk about her not feeling okay. And that it's okay to ask somebody else for help or a solution. And that it's okay that she can move through an uncomfortable feeling or episode and move to happiness and peace. That will happen and it can happen and we can bridge it. It's also important to lend a voice and a meaningful connection in a way that you feel is the most appropriate. When I see somebody struggling, sometimes they can answer the question, how can I help you? Or what do you need from me? Sometimes they can't. Sometimes we have to lend the voice and we have to lend the language that goes with it. A lot of times I'll say to people like, hey, would it be helpful to you if I made the coffee first? Would that help you if I brought the coffee over? Because a lot of the time we don't know how to ask for help. We don't know how to ask for assistance in feeling safe or feeling peaceful, or how to feel mindful. It's like, hey, could it help you if I turn this up or turn this down or closed your door while you're eating your lunch? How can I help you? How can I lend a voice and give you the language to ask for peace and safety and protection? So just to be mindful of that. Be present, be understanding, be non-judgmental, and that we're all humans moving through this. And we want to remember to be kind and gracious with ourselves and with others, and to really find peace of mind as a way that we move through each second of our life. And be forgiving in knowing that there are going to be times you're really good at it, and there's going to be times you're not. And that's okay. This conversation is not meant to make people feel judged about like, oh geez, I don't do that all the time, like that makes me a horrible person. That's not true. There's always times, trust me, there's times I am not good at this, and that is totally okay, because that's part of being human. It's part of this peace of mind being a journey, whether it's a journey from 1 second to the other, 1 hour to the other, or for the rest of our life. This is something that we're on together as human beings. It's not something we're innately born with knowing how to cope with. So just be present in your life. Worry about what's in front of us, take it one moment by one moment, and then move on from there. And always be open to ask, like, how can I help you with that? Instead of going into, well, they didn't ask and they didn't talk to me and they don't need this and they don't need that. And going into our ego and our defensiveness and our way to kind of shut down and self-isolate, that's the time that we should really be leaning in instead of pulling away. That's the really time we need to lean into each other and try to help understand each other. And there may be times that we don't and we disagree and we feel like we can't help someone, but we can still be present, we can still hold space, and we can still be gracious and kind. Um, so yeah, I hope that helps a little bit when we're talking about how do we model this for other people in our life. So I've put my contact information here also. Um, when I think about peace of mind, this would not be the ideal picture that would come to my mind. But when I really look at it, I was so happy in this picture. Um, both of my children had caught chickens and they were at an animal sanctuary. So when we think about like what brings us happiness, it may not be, the perfect picture, the perfect time on the perfect day with makeup and whatever is going on. But really, when I look at this picture, this is such an image of happiness in my life and me having such peace of mind and presence at that moment in our life. So sometimes we just want to think about like out of every day, what do we find peaceful and present and kind, and what brings us happiness, and what gives us that sense of having peace of mind, even if it's just for a moment. We want to make sure that we're following that journey.
Thank you, Jamie. And we do have a question, and you are free to ask questions. You can use the Q&A or the chat. We'll see them either way. And the question I currently have is, do you think joy and happiness are the same?
Um, that's a toughie. So to me, sometimes the difference can be time frame. So joy to me is more short term, whereas happiness to me is more longer term. Happiness to me is a extended emotion. Now, yes, you can be happy in an individual moment. Um, to me, happiness always feels a little deeper. It always tends to have a little bit of a deeper context. I can be joyful around things that make me laugh or things that are funny. But to me, like happiness is a deeper sense of feeling connected and safe and happy with my choices. It feels a little deeper for me. But that doesn't mean that I'm right. Other people may feel differently about that, and that's totally okay.
Okay, and the next question I saw is the 236 area code on your phone number. Is it supposed to be 239?
It is. It is 239 six
Okay,
five nine 7751.
great. And then there was a comment just about you being awesome and a great message and suggestions, and loved your slides and quotes. That was from Deb Logan.
Thank
Does
you.
anyone else have any questions or comments? We have a thank you from Project Help
Some of my favorite people over there at Project Help.
and a great presentation from Maria Ortiz, and quite a few very positive comments. Wonderful presentation.
Well, Lucy's one of my favorite people on the planet. So,
Now, I have a question.
sure.
Have you ever encountered, I'm sure you have, but if you can give an example of a challenging situation in which how you work through achieving somebody being able to find peace of mind during an extremely challenging situation.
Sure. So, many, many moons ago, I worked in a hospital ER, which are pretty stressful situations. And I had a family who had just lost a son in a car accident. And it was their only son. He was, an amazing hockey player, like a wonderful family, the stereotype. And it was pretty traumatic, and the situation was kind of out of control. Like the hockey team was there, everybody was there, the school was there. It was pretty chaotic. And I could see his mom in the waiting room. And I remember the nurses, not that I love nurses. However, this one was colorful. And she said, "You need to go out there and get this situation under control." And I remember saying to her, "Well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get control of this situation. This situation is out of control for a reason. And all of those people are entitled to every single one of the feelings that they're having. How I can create a safe space for them to have them is a different thing." And I remember going out there, and his mom and his dad were there. And of course, as you can imagine, they were completely devastated and, in those acute phases of trauma and trying to figure out what was going on and trying to get information, and while at the same time being of service to others and trying to be kind and appreciative. And I remember I just sitting there with his mom, and there was I knew at that time, I was very young, and I remember saying at that time I had no idea how this woman was feeling or how it would make me feel or any way that I could possibly relate to her or in any way soothe what had just happened to the rest of her life and the rest of her story. And I just remember sitting beside her, and I said to her, "Are you cold?" This was in Canada, by the way, so it was cold. And I was like, "Are you cold, ma'am?" And she was like, "Yeah, it's very cold in here." And I said, "Can I get you a blanket and a cup of coffee?" And that was really it. I didn't really say anything else to her. I just sat there with her and held space for her. And she cried and, went through her processes. And I kept, adjusting her blanket and keeping her warm. And at times she held my hand. And, afterwards, if you would ask me then, I would have been like, I did a whole lot of nothing, really. But I remember like months later, she was like, "You were the most important person in that room to me at that moment," which to me at that time, I felt I did nothing. And I wasn't effective at all as a social worker. But really, all I did for her was hold space and let her know that there was somebody here that was going to guide her through it. And really show her that she was going to get out of this emergency room. And that doesn't mean that what was to face her the next day was going to be any more rosy, but that she was going to get through this and that there were people who were going to support her along the way, even if it's just with a blanket and a cup of coffee.
Thank you, Jamie. I have two more
Sure.
questions. How do you deal with the memories that keep returning and interfering with peace of mind?
That's a very good question. So, a lot of the time when there's been trauma, particularly, or vicarious trauma or tertiary trauma, it's really important to process them and heal them. And that looks different for lots of people. But you're right, there absolutely is brain biology that goes with replaying memories and thoughts and feelings and responses that haven't been healed, especially when it's been something acute and traumatic. So it's really important to reach out for help and reach out for resources that can help us heal those wounds or begin the process of healing them. What I say to people when they ask that question is, the first thing you need to know is that it's possible. It's possible to heal it. It's possible to change that, and it's possible to get better. Doesn't mean that that thing or whatever is going on has ever not going to happen or have happened to you, but it doesn't have to be who you are. It's something that happened to you, and that's I think really important. It allows people to regain their power.
Great. And before I go to the next question, somebody had asked earlier if we're recording this. The answer is yes. And everybody who had registered for this webinar will receive a link to this webinar. So I just wanted to mention that. And also we have the question, what is forgiveness in the context of peace of mind?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So forgiveness for me is also a personal value. Because what one person feels is necessary in forgiveness may not be the same for someone else. Someone else achieving forgiveness may feel very essential to them finding peace of mind. Sometimes for other people, it's not. So it really depends on that person and where they're standing if forgiveness is important to them in achieving peace of mind. What I would look at is like, what does forgiveness look like? Forgiveness of whom and forgiveness of what? And are those things in your control or not? And are they things you can change or not? And are they things you can heal or not? Because that may change the scope of forgiveness and your expectations of what that may look or feel like. So, forgiveness is a complex thing for people. And it can, involve their faith system and their morals and ethics and all kinds of other things that go into it. So it's really important to dissect what forgiveness is to someone before we start applying to what that looks like for their peace of mind and what they need to achieve for it. But it can be a very powerful thing for people.
Great. And we're getting close to the 59-minute mark. I just want to see if there's any other questions. I do not see any. And Jamie, I really got a lot out of that myself. And I know based on the comments, a lot of the attendees did. So really appreciate you taking the time today and sharing your expertise.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.